Welcome to the Transforming Victim Services Performance Measure Overview video. By the end of this video, you will be able to provide a general description of the Office for Victims of Crime, or OVC, Transforming Victim Services, or TVS, performance measurements, and explain how and why OVC chooses the measures for your award, as well as answer some common questions such as, what is an OVC question set? Or how do I satisfy the reporting requirements? The formatting of the measures that you see may look different depending upon which reporting system you're logged into, but nevertheless, the questions and the data will remain the same. So let's start at the top. Understanding what the performance measures are that you need to collect and track begins with the award solicitation. OVC selects which questions and specific topic areas best align with the activities associated with your award. As part of your winning proposal, there is a beginning of a performance management plan, which covered grant activities supported by the award. The solicitation is where the performance measures and the performance management plan started to come together prior to the first reporting period. The performance measures will then remain constant throughout the life of the award. While rare, OVC may assign additional measures under special circumstances. From the solicitation, OVC will have a set of performance measures grouped into topic areas and then questions within each of those topic areas. Most of these question sets that you see on the screen now are often utilized by all TVS grantees, regardless of award type. This slide lists all of the topic areas that OVC has currently, but you will not answer all of them. Please refer to the TVS solicitation map to locate your award and specific performance measure assignments. Again, the goal of this video is an overview so that you know what data you need to collect and track before logging in to any reporting platform. So now let's go into the Transforming Victim Services question sets, and I will give you an overview of each question set and some suggested validations. So before we look at the specific questions, let's start with the two main types of data you'll report. First, each question set has what's called a baseline question. This is often asked in the first reporting period only. You will gather information to answer the baseline questions from your award proposal, and the baseline questions will cover activities that happened in the quarter prior to the award starting. Second is the current quarter measures, which is aggregated by OVC to analyze all of the data submitted by TVS grantees. Remember, grantees should only report data on activities supported by their specific TVS award. So let's start with training. Training measures do have a baseline question, which you should have covered in the award proposal. Then, the rest of the training measures will cover aspects such as number of trainings scheduled and conducted, along with participants who registered, and details of any feedback surveys that you would have sent out. Surveys and feedback ask you to identify any sort of increase in knowledge and if that knowledge has been implemented by the learners. Many different award types and programs have a training component. And again, here is a summary of the training-related performance measures. Remember, training data is one place where you can connect performance measure inputs and activities to outputs and outcomes, which ultimately helps tell your program story. So before saving and submitting a report, stop and review the data you've entered into any OVC reporting platform. Here are some tips and examples to help you increase the thoroughness, accuracy, consistency, and usability of your performance measure data. Semi-annually, you can review the raw data entered for each quarter and calculate the percentage of registered individuals who completed the training, for example. You may also want to look at what sort of strategic planning for new trainings or updates to any training materials that your team did during the reporting period, and also what sorts of results you saw in the training surveys. The planning and eventual outcomes from your trainings make a great story to tell in your semi-annual narrative questions. Now let's move on to technical assistance. This is another set of questions that does have a baseline, which will start with activities that you may have listed in your proposal and may have also been in the solicitation, and should cover materials that were developed or will be developed and listed in your proposal. TA measures are often an underestimated opportunity to highlight continuous quality improvements and sometimes ask yourself some tough questions. For example, were the number of requests that were received actually completed during the reporting period? Were the outcomes what you expected? And were there any TA feedback surveys sent? Don't forget, a definition for completed or closed TA is very important. These measures should be discussed and defined before you start any sort of technical assistance, because they will often continue to work as part of your outreach efforts. And once the award starts, it can be really hard to stop and re-implement definitions later. So the performance measures for technical assistance allow you to kind of gauge the process and where the award is in terms of your goals and objectives. So each of your teams should be trained on how to capture technical assistance work. Some of the examples of validations on the screen you can use are to look at an analysis of the themes in the different technical assistance requests. Count the number of requests received during the reporting period and compare it to the prior 2 quarters. Was there an increase or a decrease? Again, was that what you expected to see? And lastly, in all cases, consider using one particular technical assistance request as a story to share in the semi-annual report narratives. So now let's move on to the technology performance measures. These are very precise, so please make sure to review the solicitation and your proposal. One key item to note is, how are you defining system-level IT improvements? Here are some validation points to consider during each reporting period, such as determining an as-of date for system improvements and whether these improvements relate to an entire system or an aspect of your technology system. Another key component to look at and verify is the as-of date. Please verify that you're using the same as-of date to continue to report a previously deployed system improvement. These measures also do have responses that can be related to the training and partnership question sets that we'll cover in future slides. Because often technology awards will have a subrecipient who will report on and share some of these measures. Data gathering. If you're assigned the data gathering questions, please go back to the solicitation and to your proposal to look for any sort of information that can support the baseline measure. Data gathering initiatives during the reporting period are those that are completed, is what you will report, and information and resources disseminated as a result of those data gathering initiatives. Again, remember to define what is a complete data gathering initiative, as these often take multiple reporting periods to plan. Again, before saving and submitting a report, stop and review the data that you've entered. On this slide are some tips and examples to consider, such as how does the data gathering initiative align with the award goals and objectives? Does the semi-annual narrative explain any progress or any unexplained increases in deliverables? Remember to report resources disseminated, not just the number of copies that were disseminated. For example, if 10 copies of one toolkit were disseminated, then report one resource. Look also at planned activities for the upcoming reporting period and compare it to any prior reports for data gathering initiatives. Again, these data gathering initiatives often take multiple reporting periods to plan and to disseminate, so you want to make sure that you are tracking your deliverable progress towards the goals that you listed in the proposal. Some examples of data gathering initiatives will include literature searches, needs assessment, gap analysis, and reports that support improvement of delivery for SAVE victim services. Now let's move on to partnerships and collaborative partnership measures. These enable OVC to learn, first of all, on whom their funding is being focused in relation to a larger collaborative, for example, a multidisciplinary team. On this slide is what you will report in terms of a baseline measure, those agencies that may have been participating in activities prior to the grant funding, as well as measures that you will report during each reporting period. This is an important set of measures not to overlook because they really allow OVC to demonstrate the number of agencies that are involved in a particular initiative. So on this slide are some tips and validations to consider as you look at your collaborative partnership measures. These measures are really where actions convert the baseline into outputs. Most often collaborative partnerships that last are not created overnight, and they don't just drop into your lap. They take planning and often funding. As part of your performance management plan, ask yourself, what is the partnership goal for, say, the next 6 months versus the life of the award? Can this be done using new formalized collaboration agreements that were established as a result of grant funding, or do you need to consider a subaward? This often gets to another place where you can create really interesting stories for your semi-annual report narrative. For example, consider calculating the percentage of change in the total number of participating organizations by looking at the last 2 quarters of data that were reported in relation to the baseline. Were there increases or decreases? Is this what you expected to see? How can this enhance your award story? So now let's move on to strategic planning. This one often has a lot to report if you're assigned this performance measure. So you may want to consider looking at the reporting period and focusing on those particular deliverables that were completed. And again, you want to make sure that you're defining what the deliverables are and what is considered completed. Each measure in this set really also connects inputs and activities to those outputs, those tangible deliverables, which enhance your program story and ultimately see if you were successful or not. So on this slide are, again, some validations to consider before submitting your report. For example, check your Outlook calendar. Did you capture all of the meetings and other initiatives that were related to the program's work? So check with your OVC grant manager and make sure that you're defining what the initiatives are, especially if they comprise several different activities. One community awareness campaign, for example, may include sending several flyers, posting public service advertisements at bus stops, and exhibiting at a community fair. Grantees would usually consider reporting this community awareness campaign as one initiative. But if the initiative then has a second round in a later reporting period, you'll want to also consider having that there as well. Again, the narrative questions are a great place to round out talking about what each initiative is and connecting this back to your partnership measures. How many of your partners were involved in creating a community fair, for example? So let's move on to the victim services. Were you assigned this set of measures? If you were, then make sure your data collection system can really count or track what is needed on this slide and on the slides that we'll get to next. The victim services measures ask for counts of things like demographics, new and returning clients, as well as being able to count the provisions of direct services to crime victims. Report all victims served through your specific TVS award. These measures at first appearance look straightforward, but many questions do arise as grantees are reporting on victim services measures. Remember, each measure must be an unduplicated count. So here are some of the direct services measures that you will be reporting on. We spoke previously about performance measures being an unduplicated count of the number of individuals who receive services. This will also include the anonymous contacts. Any new individuals served for the first time will also be included within direct services. And a key to ensuring that these counts are correct is going to be within your data collection system. So grantees should remember to only report, again, activities supported by the specific OVC award. In this set of measures, the services relate to the activities outlined in the solicitation and your proposal and are key to defining which individuals are served under the award. So on this slide, we will see some suggested validations to consider as you're entering your victim services performance measures. For example, if the please explain text box is made available to you, does your information in there make sense? We often will refer back to the VOCA or Victims of Crime Act rule to make sure that any allowable expenses that are explained align with that final act. Looking at any particular subgrantees that you may be working with and reviewing their reports. For example, victimizations and hate crime. That will require an explanation in terms of how you're defining hate crime. You also want to make sure to validate the total victimizations for all individuals served, plus anonymous contacts. Total individuals who receive services across all of the main service categories does need to be greater than or equal to the sum of all individuals served for that particular reporting period. I know that some of these measures and validations can be a little challenging, and our help desk team is here to sort through those with you. On the screen is the contact information for our help desk. We will make sure to have this information posted in any of our printed resources, and will also be on the OVC Performance Measurement webpage. And I want to thank you so much for your time and attention today. This ends the TVS Performance Measures Overview video.